Chad, I think it was about 7 years ago, before I came on to Veritas. I had a coworker of mine, James, good guy, and he heard I was coming over to work for a wealth management firm, which I didn't really know exactly what that was going to look like, right? But I knew I was going to come on to work here, and he was trying to look out for me because why are you going to do that? He's like, I would never work for a company like that. And I'll never invest ever again because my sister lost all her money in the stock market years ago. And he was trying to be a nice friend and just look out for me. And, we didn't lead to a big conversation, but I also didn't really know how to respond realistically. But that idea of his sister, the way he would tell it, lost all her money in the stock market. Well, I want to get into a couple stories you may have around that idea. But first off, I'm just going to ask, can that happen? Can somebody lose all their money in the stock market?
Welcome to the Blue Collar Millionaire Show. I am your host, Chad Hufford, and this is the podcast where we celebrate the unsung heroes of the working world. Each week, we dive into the incredible stories of honest, hardworking folks who have found financial success through grit, determination, and good old-fashioned elbow grease. So if you're ready to be inspired and learn how to turn your hard work into your own success story, you're in the right place. This is the Blue Collar Millionaire Show.
First of all, it depends on what you mean by stock market, because we'll just touch on from other episodes. You shop at Costco or Walmart, but you don't buy Walmart.
When I go to Walmart, I'm not buying Walmart.
You're shopping there, and might be a necessary evil. You're there with the crowds. I don't particularly like shopping, but it's something you put up with to get the products and services and whatever that you need. Mm-hmm. That's what the stock market is. You are buying, if you're investing properly, a well-diversified portfolio of companies all across the globe. The stock market is the conduit so people like you and I can purchase. It's the stock market. It is the market on which companies are bought and sold. So we don't actually invest in the stock market. We use the stock market to purchase these companies. So I think people kind of need to redefine what stock market is. But when people say that, they usually mean individual companies or mutual funds. Now, if somebody is buying, let's say, an index or some sort of well-diversified fund, and people tell me all the time, like, I lost all my money in the S&P. What that means is probably had an index fund in buying S&P 500 companies. But something like that, Logan, is purely, it has nothing to do with the finances. It's purely a human phenomenon, because if, let's just say in 2008, somebody lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in some fund, and we'll just pick on the S&P. So you can't directly invest in the S&P. Let's say you have an S&P 500 index fund that copies or mirrors the S&P 500. So the S&P 500 peaked at somewhere around like 1600. I don't remember. It was like 1587. This is the number I have in my head, but I don't know if that's correct. Let's call it 1600. And it crashed to 700 something. In fact, I think intraday one day it actually hit 666.
Sure.
Closed a little bit higher,
right.
but let's say it went from, nice round numbers, 1600, almost 1600, to a little bit lower than 700. But it's 7,500 today. So it is an investment impossibility that if you stayed the course, you lost money in any investment somewhat mirroring the S&P.
Yeah.
Any kind of mutual fund mirroring that index. I don't see how it happened.
Right.
How do you go from, even if you bought at the worst possible time, put $1 million in an S&P 500 mutual fund, October 9th, 2007. That was the day the market peaked before it went down 57%. So $1 million would have gone down to about 400,000 in 15 months. And you would have been down, you would have lost yet, but you would have been down $600,000. Now that 400,000 that you had left would have grown to, gosh, I don't even know how many millions today. 8 million maybe, with dividends reinvested. But you just had to stay with it. So the only way to lose is to panic and sell and take a temporary decline and turn it into a permanent loss. Let me just say that again. So it would decline to that amount. So the only way to turn that temporary decline into a permanent loss is to panic and sell. Now, can you put everything in an individual company or maybe a handful?
That's what I was
of
going to
companies?
ask. Is that a different way?
That's very, very different.
Okay.
And that is really the only way to lose all your money in the stock market, where you have all your money in Enron or you have all your money in Blockbuster.
Right.
And that happens sometimes. And even if it doesn't completely disappear, I mean, you could have all your money in a company. I mean, think of like Xerox or IBM. I mean, they're around, but they're shadows of what they used to be.
Okay.
And you may have lost all of it, but could that one company decline and your financial plan takes a mortal wound that you can never recover from? I mean, absolutely. There's a guy I met with years and years ago, about that same time frame. So let's say 2008, somewhere in there. And he worked for BP. And he had about half of his 401k in BP stock.
Okay.
And I was explaining the importance of diversifying. And he said he understood that, but he said, I'm having a really hard time. First of all, BP has treated me very well. He said they've been a great company. They not only have paid me well, but they actually helped educate me and get me to the point where I was worth the money that they paid me.
Right.
And I feel disloyal if I were to sell their stock. And he said, but the other part of it is, and for our listeners who don't remember, at this period in time, oil was like $140 a barrel. So BP stock was actually doing pretty well, especially compared to everything else. And he decided that he wasn't going to move forward and didn't accept the plan that we had written out for him. And then a couple years later, the Gulf of Mexico spill happened. And to this day, BP stock has never recovered. And the last time I talked to him, because he obviously didn't become a client, was several years later, and he ended up taking an adjunct, a part-time position at the University of Alaska just to make ends meet, because his financial plan was basically torpedoed. It lost his job, lost most of his retirement, because too much of it was tied up in a single stock.
Which, when I think about, putting all my eggs in one basket, as an investment, I mean, I think it's very easy for me to go, okay, well, yeah, I shouldn't just throw all my money in my friend's startup, no matter how good
Right.
it looks, right? Or, some crazy tech company that I read a bunch of articles about that sounds awesome. Like I can pretty easily see where that's probably not wise. But it seems like it'd be pretty darn safe if I wanted to throw all my money in. I'm just picking these names at random, but Costco or Amazon or whatever, giant companies, they're probably not going to go down. But I guess you would have thought that about BP too, right?
Well, and it's even more risk when it's the employer you're working for.
Why?
Well, because you could lose all your retirement or a huge chunk of your retirement and your job on the same day. So think about,
Because you're doubling down, basically.
you're not basically, it's exactly what you're
Okay.
doing. So think about that Enron example. Like in Enron, we're telling people, like, if you had the option to buy stock, like it's only going up. And if you're not putting your 401k in company stock, like, are you really in it? With
That was
rest
the
of us?
messaging
Mhm.
that was happening. Okay. Enron was before. I literally, there's a, I don't
Yeah,
know,
you
do
were
you know
like
the,
11 or 12 probably.
do you know the movie Fun with Dick and Jane?
Yes,
Which, I mean, I know they don't use the name Enron, but it's saying it's supposed to be.
basically.
Okay. So that's my only understanding.
Yeah. So if you were an Enron employee with a broadly diversified 401k, you lost your job, and that stinks. But other than the stain of Enron being on your resume,
Yeah.
I mean, and trying to get hired again during a recession, because there's a recession going on then as well. I mean, yeah, it would have been tough sailing, but it probably would not have been irreparable. But if your 401k and your job are wrapped up in that thing, and we don't need to pick on, I mean, I guess we can't pick on Enron, they deserve it. But I mean, there's a lot of really, really good companies out
Right.
there. General Electric, they're a shadow of what they used to be. Think of like Kodak. I mean, some of our listeners don't even know what film is, but film is what you used to send in. You would take pictures on your camera. You had no idea what your pictures, how they turned out. If you had kids, you didn't know if your kids were taking pictures, and you would take this film out of your camera, you'd send it in, you'd wait for it seemed like weeks, and then you would get back in the mail these 5x7
I
rectangles.
just remember
with
going to
these pictures.
Costco and having to like root through
But even Costco, like that was so much better. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that was even a step beyond like sending in your film cartridge and literally waiting for weeks to see what kind of pictures that you had taken months ago. You've forgotten. It was like a surprise.
It's like a second vacation.
Yeah, it
Went to
was.
Grand Canyon all over again.
But I mean, Kodak, they were one of the most powerful companies, one of the most profitable companies in the world, and they essentially disappeared. We talk about Xerox and IBM. Think about Blockbuster.
Yeah.
Bear Stearns, Washington Mutual, TWA Airlines. There's we go on and on and on. These companies that we thought were too big to fail, they're not. And even if they don't fail completely, like our friend with BP, never recovered. And there is, if you own, even if it isn't exclusive, your retirement strategy should never be dictated by any one company. You should never have enough money in any one company to make a killing. You should never have enough money in any one thing to get killed by that company either. So that is the trade-off with diversification. You will never strike it rich with a single company.
Right.
But if you're broadly diversified, your risk is so thinly spread across at least hundreds, probably should be thousands of companies, then no company's failure is ever your financial failure.
So you shared an example of somebody who you knew that, really did, maybe not lost it all, but lost darn close to it all, right? Because so much of it
his financial plan was mortally wounded.
Yeah. Super, super concentrated in one entity, even though it was a really big, successful entity. What about a different way to, lose it all, which I'm doing quotes because you shouldn't be losing it all, but the person that is experiencing a decline in the valuation of their investments, I think that's the correct way to put it, and they choose to panic out. But somebody who, because you shared an example in a recent episode of somebody who did choose to do that. At the end of the day, they were not willing to go the path that you were trying to coach them on, and obviously they're free to do what they want to do. Did you have somebody that was right on the edge that wanted to just totally sell out?
So that was a COVID example, right? There was a couple during COVID who they had
PhDs,
wonderfully diversified portfolio, very, very intelligent, high character. They were diligent, but they lost their nerve. They lost their faith in the future. And they honestly got caught up in a lot of the fear mongering that's going on. It was way beyond financial, for folks that don't remember. Someday that'll be ancient history, but it's crazy to think that was 6 years ago already. But those one of the things that was so hard about COVID too, is it wasn't just something that affected our finances or our economy or our job market. Like it reshaped every facet of our lives. How kids interacted with school, whether they even went to school, churches, even just family get-togethers. You couldn't get away from it, even if you wanted to. That's one of the hardest things, I think, for some people, just to not look at their statement during a decline. But what those people did is exactly what we'd already talked about. They turned a temporary decline into a permanent loss. And in that moment, cost them over $1 million. Yeah. Assuming that they never got that reinvested in anything similar, just looking at where their portfolio would have been now, it's probably getting close to an 8-figure mistake, probably somewhere between 8 and 10 million. Hope they're okay. But what's interesting about that is I got another call, probably days apart, and they were basically saying the same thing. And I tried to explain to both parties. I probably said much of the very same thing, But for whatever reason, I was able to find just enough hope for the future for them to see, okay. And I remember kind of where it came from is they want to move everything to basically cash. And I said, how much cash do you have? We went through the numbers. Basically, it was like 4 years of living expenses.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't even drawing on their retirement accounts yet. So I said, even if you have to start drawing, you have 4 years to let this thing recover. And I think, and I don't remember exactly, but I think I said, can we give it 2? Can we just give it 2, whatever the time frame was, I cut it in half. Can we give it 2 years and just see what happens? You'll still have enough cash to continue riding it.
Right.
But, and really what I wanted was just for 6 months. And it didn't even take 6 months, but
right.
they decided, okay.
Because this was COVID.
It was during COVID.
Yeah.
This is, like I said, just days apart. So, and their account was down. They didn't have as much money invested, but still substantial. It was down a couple $100,000. And similar investment strategy, honestly, not exact, but very, very similar. So on a percentage basis, probably down roughly the same, just a little bit less capital, but they were down several $100,000, and they agreed to stay the course, at least for the moment. And within 3 or 4 months, they were back, they'd fully recovered and were soon hitting new highs. Now, that decline in COVID was unprecedented in its violence in the decline, but also pretty much unprecedented in its recovery.
Right.
So we usually don't see such a stark V shape where that V is so narrow. So for people listening, it isn't like, hey, hang in there for a few months, all gets better. I mean,
right.
Just in 2022, that decline didn't go down quite as far, about 27% in the S&P, but it took, I think, roughly about 15 months to recover.
Okay.
So a lot longer. But with this couple, and we actually talked about this just a couple of years ago, and they very vividly remember that conversation. It was over the phone, and they were concerned about even getting in contact with people and things like that. And they actually lived in Fairbanks at the time, so it was even harder. But still trying to build those, or really not build those connections, but really lean on that relationship capital that we had built. And they said it was super hard. Like they did not want to stay the course. Because so much, every fiber of their being and so much of what was on the news was telling them, you need to panic, you need to bolt, you need to get out of there. Kind of like what this guy was telling you.
Right.
No, this is, you're going to lose it all if you remain course. But I gave them just enough hope, or they were able to find just enough hope to stick it out just a little bit longer, and that made all the difference. And they're financially independent. They're doing, actually they just moved out of state last year, but doing very, very well. But that was definitely an inflection point. And not only in that moment, but we've had several declines since then. And now they have that moment to look back on. Like, man, we were up against it. We almost gave up, but we didn't. And now we've got several 100,000 extra reasons to remind us
right.
why we need to stick with it. So when we've hit those times of volatility in the past, again, maybe didn't decline quite as quickly, but it could have, but sometimes has lasted longer. They have that reminder. We've weathered the storm before. And for some people, it's just as valuable, is knowing that they've been in a difficult situation. They've weathered the storm. They did not make the easy choice. They did the hard right thing. Because next time the market goes down, because this couple's wealth has grown, the dollar amount will likely be even more. I mean, just on a percentage basis. Right. If you've got $1 million that goes down 25%, you're down 250. If you've got $2 million and it goes down 25%, you're down 500. So like they will continue to experience declines just as deep, maybe not as scary, but just as deep as what they experienced back in 2020. But now they have that proof that they know how to get through that.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, I want to ask about one more thing, and it kind of relates back to the other way that somebody might lose it all, and that being, kind of putting all my eggs into one basket. Is there somebody that comes to mind, whether it's a client or not, that wanted to maybe not put all of their eggs, but if they had a dozen eggs, they wanted to put 6 of them into one basket kind of thing. Whether it was in a specific business or put it on gold or whatever, somebody who wanted to do that, whether you were able to talk them off the ledge or not.
Okay. I mean, so that was the BP example. It wasn't everything,
right?
But it was half of his 401k.
Right.
So when you say all in one basket, you mean like in a single investment entity?
Yeah.
Because I just want to clarify that, because some people think like, man, if I have everything in one account, that's all my eggs in one basket.
Right.
And like, that could be, but you could have 7 different accounts that all are buying SpaceX stock.
Right.
And you have 7 accounts, but you're all buying the same thing. Or you have one account that has 10,000 different companies in it.
Right.
So how many accounts you have doesn't really dictate whether or not it's all in one basket or whether or not you're diversified. In fact, I think what we often see is people who have a lot of multiple accounts are unaware of the redundancy. And maybe it's not quite as gross as 60% of their wealth is in one company.
Right.
But it might be 60% of their wealth is in the top 20 companies of the S&P. Well, it's not one company, but it might be an industry, it might be the tech industry. So basically, whatever the tech industry does, their financial plan will be drug along like a dog on a leash, dictated by what that industry does. Their financial independence will be dictated by the industry, which is what we don't want.
Right.
But no, we've had folks that, want to put a significantly larger portion than they should into a specific entity. Again, a lot of times it is employer stock. Usually we can work around that. But what I'll often tell people is, I get it. If you want to have a percentage in this stock or whatever, maybe it was gifted. We had somebody recently with NVIDIA, and part of the thing wasn't just NVIDIA had been shooting the lights out for him for 20 years, because he bought it before anybody had heard of it.
Okay.
And I mean, he was up something crazy, like 90+%. So, I mean, I don't remember the exact numbers. He is one of Shane's clients, but maybe he invested 100,000 and it was now 1.2 million or something like that. Part of his issue also was he didn't want to pay taxes.
Okay.
Because it was outside of his retirement account, which that can add insult to injury too. And one of the things that Shane had told him is like, well, the government's going to get their pound of flesh, like one way or another. Do you want to wait until that stock crashes and then you have less gains? Or do you want to basically take the win and then diversify that? And thankfully he decided to take the win and diversify that out. And he left a little bit. And the way that we kind of structured it is, he basically had an amount that he needed to make all his retirement income planning work. And he was able to leave some individual stock on the side. He had a couple other stocks too on the sidelines, but diversified almost all of it, 90+%.
Okay. Might
have been 95, doesn't matter. But he still had a significant chunk outside of that. And basically there was enough that, if one of those companies continues to shoot the lights out, like, okay, it's going to be cool for him.
Right.
But if they melted down completely, he was still going to be financially okay.
So if those if they went Kodak or they went Blockbuster, that's fine. Not going to disrupt his financial plan to a
Yeah,
degree.
it'll ruin his day, maybe even his week, possibly his month, but it's not going to ruin his financial plan.
That's pretty cool.
He diversified that out enough where everything necessary to meet his and his wife's income needs now and in the future was broadly diversified in a strategy, in a portfolio around his specific needs. And what it basically turned into was almost entertainment.
Yeah.
It went from a very, very speculative investment to now entertainment, where if those companies shoot the lights out, he's super excited about it. But if they don't, they're still going to be okay.
Well, the next time we talk, maybe we'll talk about emu farms. I want to ask you about some of the craziest investment options that people have presented to you.
We got emu farms, trees in Costa Rica, a lot of family startups. But emu actually, it tastes very good.
I've had ostrich, but never emu.
Yeah, and there's oil too. They have it's in skin cream. I don't know what it does, but
emu oil.
Emu oil. It's a very high in vitamin K2 and vitamin
And this
D.
isn't a sponsored podcast.
No,
we're not getting
no, we're
money
not
for this.
selling. I do not own or invest in any emu farms. But yeah, we'll get to that next time.
Thanks, Jed.
Thanks for listening to the Blue Collar Millionaire Show. We hope this episode has been inspiring and beneficial to you. If you want help on your journey to financial freedom, reach out to us at veritasalaska.com. We'd love to sit down over a cup of coffee with you, either here in our office or virtually, and get to know you and your needs. And though this podcast is free of charge, we do ask that you please do us two quick favors. If you enjoyed the episode, give our pod a great rating on iTunes or whatever podcast platform you use, and also give us a follow on Instagram. We hope you have a wonderful day filled with gratitude and intentionality. God bless.